Hello everyone and welcome to another very nice game. Also from round 3, it is Max Warmerdam versus Nodirbek Abdusattorov, and a very crucial one for the standings after round 3. Now going into this round, both Max and Nodirbek were undefeated, and they might still be after this game, but I'm not going to spoil anything. Max going into this one with a draw against Vincent Keimer and Alexis Arana, and Nodirbek defeated Leon Luke Mendonca and that crazy draw versus Pragnananda where well, it was hard to say whose queen was hanging at which point of the game. But let's get to this one. Also very interesting. Max has the white pieces and he opens with pawn to e4. And as usual, this is a top-level elite event with players just blitzing out their classical preparation, and this game is no different. Knight c6, bishop to b5. Ruy Lopez is on the board. We have a6, Morphy's defense, bishop to a4, and knight to f6. We have pawn to d3 and bishop to c5. The Anderssen variation of the Morphy's defense of the Ruy Lopez. Of course, you guys have been following the Morphy saga, so you guys know why it's called that. c3, we have d6, and both players castle. So castles, pawn to h3, and the bishop back to a7. So you don't have to worry about it being attacked with the d4 or b4. Rook to e1, and now shifting the knight over to the king side, knight e7, and preparing maybe some king side expansion, queen side expansion. We have pawn to d4, the knight moving weakened the d4 square, so Max immediately takes advantage of this, knight to g6, and bishop back to c2. And here there are some games, rook to e8 and pawn to h6 are known moves, but after bishop to d7 by Nodirbek, it is now, as of move 11, that we have a completely new game. So okay, bishop to e3, very standard developing moves, rook to e8, knight b to d2, and pawn to a5. Since white did not play pawn to b4, Nodirbek says, alright Max, you're not going to play it anytime soon. And if he tries a4 and b4, a3 and b4, then Nodirbek will advance the pawn all the way to a4 to prevent pawn to b4, of course. So after a5, we have pawn to a4, stopping pawn to b5, bishop to c6, and now queen to b1, putting pressure on this long diagonal here. We have queen to e7, and now you could play pawn to b4, and you probably should, but here Max goes for d captures on e5. We have d captures, bishop captures on a7, rook captures, and now bishop to d3, freeing up the c2 square for the queen, so the rooks are nicely connected, and you can easily shift the bishop to wherever the bishop is needed. We have knight to f8, now with ideas of maybe knight to e6 coming to c5 to put pressure on white's, basically on white's entire position. Knight to c4, and now knight 8 to d7. We have queen to c2, and pawn to g6. We have pawn to b3, and now pawn to b6, rook a to d1, and rook a back to a8. So it doesn't seem like much is happening here. It's hard to say. Well, obviously, Nodirbek much higher rated. Probably, okay, Max is very young, so I'm sure he plays for a win against everyone. But a draw against Nodirbek, I mean, there's no shaming that, regardless of who you are. Okay, we have queen to b2, but Max is much lower on time. We have queen to b2, knight to h5, knight to e3, and now rook a back to d8. We have bishop to c2, and now knight h back to f6. So both players just testing if the other guy will make some sort of a mistake. Knight to c4 and king to g7 now. We have pawn to b4. Max says, all right, we've waited long enough. Let's advance on the queen side. Rook to a8, and now rook to a1. We have pawn to h6, rook to e3, and knight to h7. We have knight f to d2 and rook to a7 now, with ideas of maybe doubling up on the a file. We have rook e back to e1, knight to g5, and now, okay, there is some pressure on that e4 pawn, but it is also sufficiently defended. So unless you bring your queen into the game, maybe something like queen d8, queen a8, and put extra pressure, white is okay with two defenders. We have knight to e3, and now knight to f6. Nodirbek brings another attacker to the pawn, and now just pawn to b5. And this is a beautiful trick by Max. It seems that he can win a pawn here, but do you see what what he had in mind if Nodirbek captures the pawn. I'm sure you guys do, as you guys are amazing players. But just in case some of you don't, the idea if bishop captures on e4 was pawn to h4, just removing one of the defenders of the bishop, and that's all there is to it. Now, if you move the knight, you lose the bishop, and if you capture on c2, then captures, and again, both of your pieces are hanging, and you're just going to be down a piece. So here, bishop to b7 was played, and now pawn to c4. Again, it seems like Nodirbek can win a pawn, and indeed he can, but it would also mean going into a passive position. For example, if the pawn is captured, let's say knight captures on e4, knight captures, bishop captures, let's say bishop captures, now knight g4 attacks the bishop, and if the bishop moves, then you will win back the e5 pawn. The only way to insist on this is to play pawn to f5, or maybe something tricky like pawn to h5, but unless you're willing to open up your king like this, for the price of one pawn, maybe look for something else. So that's why Nodirbek goes knight to d7, adds a defender to the e5 pawn now, and Max has the correct idea. He plays knight to d5, but this correct idea should have been prepared with rook to a3. I'm not going to tell you why, because that would spoil the pause the video moment, but he missed something very interesting by playing knight to d5. Feel free to pause the video and try to figure out what Max missed by playing this knight to d5 move, while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding this idea, and for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is knight captures on h3 with check. That's the point. The reason is that the knight on d2 is undefended. And how would rook to a3 help us? Well, rook to a3 would have prevented any and all such tricks. And plus also the rook definitely belongs there if you want to shift it over to the attack. And now capturing wouldn't be all that impressive. You just capture on d5 first, then however white recaptures, you're just going to give a check, and then you're going to pick up the knight on d2, and you're going to be in a much better position. You've won a pawn. I mean, this is winning for black. So after knight captures on h3, king to f1 was played by Max, and now bishop captures on d5. We have c captures, and now knight to g5. So Nodirbek opened up the white king's position. He's up a pawn. He's up on time. 22 minutes versus Max's 4. But okay, 3 more moves until time control is reached, and now rook to a3. Even without this pawn, the rook definitely belongs there. f6 by Nodirbek. So okay, Nodirbek is now up a pawn. The question is, can he push this for a win? Of course, you can always push. The question is, how much do you want the full point? We have king to e2, Max looking for a safer square for his king, knight to c5, and king to d1. We have rook a to a8, and king to c1. Rook a to d8, and now pawn to g3, knight to f7, and pawn to f4. This is a very interesting decision by Max. Instead of just, something like king to b1 or maybe doubling up on the e-file, he goes for the active pawn to f4 move. He says, all right, I'm down a pawn, my position is worse, but I'm the one that can go for the attack. And with the rooks getting doubled on the e-file, this is actually a very good idea. E captures on f4, g captures, and now even allowing rook captures on d5. If captures, then pawn captures. It wasn't a blunder of a second pawn, but rather Max uses this time to get his pieces into the attack. Rook h5, and now pawn to e5. F captures, we have rook a to e3, now doubling up on the e-file. Knight to d7, and f captures on e5. We have knight f captures on e5, and now rook to d1. Knight to f6, and now rook d back to e1. And it seems like there's no way to make progress here. Even though Nodirbek is up 3 pawns, it's very, very hard for him to actually do something with his king so wide open. We have knight f back to d7, and now rook to d1, and Nodirbek tries king to h7. And indeed, he puts Max in a very unpleasant situation. Time control has already been reached, but Max is again down to 2 minutes on the clock. And there is only one move that helps him, and that is king to b1. Definitely not the move you think of here, but what's even worse is that he plays the second move recommended by the engine. Only this move only works if you first play king to b1, much like he blundered that pawn without playing rook to e3. First he plays queen to c3, And this is now very, very bad for him because this knight comes to f6 with tempo, and the real threat that Max had in mind simply doesn't work because of the queen on c3 and the king on c1. He plays rook to g1, which looks really, really awesome, but falls to one very particular idea. Feel free to pause the video for the second time and win the game for Nodirbek while I give you a couple of seconds. So, for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on calculating all of this out, as there's many stuff to calculate here. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is knight to d5. And yes, it works because of the queen on c3. And here, okay, bishop captures on g6 was played, but there really aren't any better moves. So bishop captures on g6, we have king to h8, interestingly, only winning move for Nodirbek. You cannot, if you capture with a knight, rook captures queen with check, and that is an issue. King to h8, and now how do you continue this? And you really have to calculate really deeply here, because maybe even Max thought that he could play this. He was very low on time, so it's hard to say how far he calculated. But the point is that rook captures on e5, the move you were banking on doesn't work for a very particular idea. Look at this, knight captures on c3, rook captures on e7, rook captures on e7, bishop captures on h5, and it seems that white is just up a piece. Why isn't this good? Well, knight to e2 with check, and the knight blocks the bishop. King has to move, knight picks up the rook on g1, and that's it. Knight captures on g1, and you will, win this game easily. Yes, it's 2 pieces for the rook, but also 2 extra pawns. The rook is winning this endgame without much problems. So after king to h8, queen to d4 was played, and now, well, it's just a very simple knight captures on e3. It's the only move that wins, but even one your uncle would play. Bishop captures on h5, we have queen to a3 with check. Again, only move that wins for Nodirbek, but he finds all of them. King to d2, and now knight to f5, and he was in this position on move 57 that Max Warmerdam resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. It looks like he's almost there, putting pressure on that e5 knight, but now his queen is hanging, and there just isn't much you can do. Like queen to c3, you go, maybe you trade queens, but then the rook comes into the attack, and there's no good place for you to highlight. King c2, knight to e3, check comes king to b1, queen captures on c3, becoming very, very sad, and you will get checkmated within a few moves. Doesn't matter what you play. Like, it's sad to even make a move. Rook to d1 can be played, and if rook captures, of course, queen b3 check, king to c1, and knight to c2. Sorry, queen to c2 will be checkmate, and well, or any other variation, literally. So after knight to f5, of course, Max resigned, and receiving his first loss of the event, unlike Arjun, who already has 2 losses after 3 rounds. So it's not that bad. But yeah, brilliant stuff by Nodirbek, and that means that going into round 4, Nodirbek and Pragnananda are leading the tournament. These are the standings. So Nodirbek and Pragnananda leading the tournament with 2.5 out of 3. With 2 points, Fabiano, Gukesh, and Vincent Keimer. With 1.5, Wei, Vladimir Fedosev, Pental, Hare Krishna, Alexis Sarana. With 1 point, Anish and Jordan. And Max, and with half a point, unbelievable, but at 2800, Arjun Ergaisi. And last year's winner of the Challenger section, Leon Luke Mendonca. But yeah, look at the lineup. I mean, look at the youngsters. Nodirbek, Prague, Fabio, okay, member of the old guard, but then Gukesh, Vincent, Wei, also a member of the old guard now. But yeah, the youngsters are definitely taking over, and it's up to the likes of Wei, Fabi, Fedosev. Also, maybe he will do well. Pentala, we'll see how it goes. But chances are, chances are a younger generation is taking first place in this one. But we'll see. It's never a good idea to write off Fabi. Fabi, if he goes on his engine mode streak, no one is going to have a good day. So we'll see what happens. It's only round 4. It's a really big tournament. Very much looking forward to all the games. So stay tuned. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Ryan Canus, Isaac Pinol Catadao, Everett Mulder, Simon Maxen, and Stand By You for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon and have an excellent rest of your day.